Welcome to Why Not Read Alpha Flight with Chris and Tom, a podcast where we take your favorite series seriously. I'm Chris Baker.
And I'm Tom Flynn, and welcome to episode 16, where we scream incoherently for 20 minutes until our voices give out, and then we just whimper hoarsely for the next 20 minutes.
While that is what we want to do after yesterday's election, we realized that reading Alpha Flight number 20 and 21 was much more enjoyable for both us and you. So we're going to do that. We're going to do that, and we're not going to think about the world sliding into the cyberpunk dystopia I was raised to fear.
Chris, I'm going to let you finish, but Tom from the future here to tell you that there's a big announcement at the end of this episode, so be sure to stick around for it. Like a lot of you, we are in the process of picking up the pieces of where we were versus where we are now.
Oh, look at that. Life imitating art.
So to remind everyone where Alpha Flight is now, here's the story so far.
After the tragic death of team founder James McDonald Hudson, aka Guardian, in issue number 12, Alpha Flight has struggled to find its identity under the emerging leadership of James's widow, Heather Hudson. She and Eugene Judd, aka Puck, have been trying to get the band back together, but were rebuffed in their first attempt to reach out to Northstar, aka Jean-Paul Beaubier, because he's a jerk.
Demi-goddess of the North, Snowbird, aka Narya, aka Anne Mackenzie, has been exploring her human side with her lover, Doug Thompson, despite telling us a few issues ago that she lacked the means to do so.
I am going to be talking about that more in future episodes.
Dear listener, I've been holding him off as long as I could, but it's coming.
She's like a Barbie doll. So Team Mystic Shaman, aka Dr. Michael Two Youngman, was recently reunited with his estranged daughter Elizabeth, who turned out to have immense innate mystical powers and a very snazzy prom dress costume for her new superhero name, Talisman.
Secret agent superhero linebacker Dr. Walter LangKowski, again, that capital K, and man,
I'm trying, listener. I'm trying to help him out.
You know, after the events of this week, I think I'm going to get even worse about Walt, but we'll see. Anyway, Walt, aka Sasquatch, performed some science magic stuff on his girlfriend. Like, literally, like, this guy's a scientist, and it felt more like he should have been wearing a robe and dealing with a cauldron, which is appropriate for this issue. Some science magic stuff on his girlfriend, Northstar's twin sister, Jean-Marie Beaubier, aka Aurora, but not like the others use their AKA, so that her powers are fully functional when she is alone, and so she won't be... He did some science mumbo-jumbo to make it so that she still has powers, doesn't have to interact with her brother, and doesn't read as a mutant. Especially that last part. Why that last part? Because Walt, despite all of his titles, remains fundamentally a white bro.
If you're interested in our deep dive on what it is that Walt was talking about while doing that, last episode is a great place to catch up on that because, boy, Walt is a dude. So with the stage set, let's dive into Alpha Flight number 20, titled Gold and Love Affairs. Cover date March 1985. Written and art by John Byrne. Background inks by Keith Williams. Lettered by Rick Parker. Colored by Andy Yankus. Edited by Denny O'Neil and Jim Shooter as editor-in-chief. And one note on these credits, I remember reading an interview with Keith Williams where he said that this was like his very first credit in a comic book, and that John Byrne himself insisted that Keith would be credited for this background work. Keith was very complimentary of Byrne as someone who helped him get his career going and let him work in the business his whole life. So, JB, looking out for creators. Good job.
The cover is an enormous face. I really don't know how else to describe it. The whole cover is a single face, a woman with distinctly gold skin tone, old-fashioned, almost flapperish hair and lips, and heavily lidded eyes that convey disdain, disinterest. I don't know what she's feeling, but she's looking at me and feeling something, and it doesn't make me feel good. It doesn't make me feel good at all. A text box on the cover screams, mysterious, menacing, macabre, gilded lily. Try to forget her.
The book opens with Sasquatch in the wilderness of southeastern British Columbia, where he spends 4 pages doing nothing but clearing timber and rerouting a river. I mean, it's impressive, but that's a lot of pages. Very pretty pages, though. There's a lot of great wilderness work here. I think John just wanted to draw some trees, rocks.
There's a poem on the first page credited as a Spanish proverb, El oro y amores eran malos de encubrir. Gold and love affairs are difficult to hide. I did some very light research, and there's not really a clear attribution here. Some of the links I came across put it into a book of proverbs that may have been mentioned in the Conquest of New Spain, which was a historical document about the Spanish, first introduction, like first visiting. Um, the
Visiting?
Americas.
Is that the word you chose there?
It's been a week.
You're just getting used to the new world and the new way we talk.
Okay, fine. So it's like talking about the initial rape of the Americas by the Spaniards, which makes golden love affairs are difficult to hide feel even more gross. But,
Ew.
you pushed it.
Thank you for that context, though.
Uh-huh. But yeah, so I didn't go much further to tracking it down because I just don't have that bandwidth at the moment. However, if you're into recent novels that reimagine that initial interaction between the Americas and Europe, I highly recommend both Alvaro Enrigue's You Dreamed of Empires and Laurent Binet's Civilizations. Both are out in paper now. Chris, you would in particular love Civilizations. It's basically about the Inca conquering Europe for all sorts of really interesting reasons. But the Incan religion merges with Christianity and runs right into Lutheranism, and it is
now you've got me interested, buddy.
If you want a revisionist history that gives you the real flavor of how absolutely batshit that period in European history was, oh man, it is some tasty stuff.
Well, that sounds delightful. Completely not alpha related, but still delightful.
Oh, somewhat alpha related because, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, but the reason this is even possible is that some Vikings originating in Newfoundland make their way further south and keep interacting with populations and killing all of them from the diseases they're bringing until they run into a group that gets sick and recover, thus creating the antibodies that pass into the wider civilization such that centuries later, Europeans show up, they don't all die.
Okay. All right, you sold me. I'm on it. Now, listeners, if you're interested in a much more lower brow take on this, season 2 of What If on Disney Plus has a similar concept where Native American tribes ended up with the power of Asgard because Asgard fell. And then when the Spanish showed up, they essentially said, no, thank you. No, thank you. So, anyways, after 5 hours of landscaping, Sasquatch is interrupted by a foreman-looking dude in a hard hat saying, "That was absolutely incredible, eh? You did in 5 hours what would have taken us 5 months if we'd even gotten started before winter set in." To which Sasquatch replies, "My pleasure, Cavelli. I needed the exercise."
I wonder sometimes if I would dislike Walt as much as I do, if not for the Sasquatch Shorzy voice.
He's just letting his true colors squeak through.
Squeak. They are clearing land and securing a water source for a planned sanitarium in the middle of the wilderness, which seems weird because isolated sanitariums have been phasing out for the last 40 years prior to 1985 due to medical advances in, among other things, antibiotics and antipsychotics. Man, I'm going to miss those. Fuck.
As they chit-chat, suddenly a bright streak appears in the sky. Aurora has come for her man, her Sasquatch. Aurora has come for her fuck toy, regardless of his form.
Recall that Aurora and Jean-Marie are distinct personalities inside the one body. Aurora being the freewheeling libertine superhero and Jean-Marie a repressed, meek Catholic girls' school survivor and teacher. Jean-Marie resents being locked away and not in control, so Aurora has been taking steps to assert her ownership over the body. Also, just from how you wrote that, Jean-Marie being locked away in the dark, unable to get out, there's something really dark about that element of it too. Like I get
like
the push pull and all.
Aurora's brain, like mind.
Yeah, like Jean-Marie is like presented as being present, as trying to get out, and that's the origin. It's dark. This whole character is really dark, dude.
Yeah, they don't go into it in ways that are unsettling, which they easily could have, but they also don't go with it in ways that are satisfying. I would love to see some more having been done in a way to help show her grow out of this instead of, oh yeah, that's her. She's fucked up. Yep, that's how it is. Top men on this, Tom. Top.
Yeah, well,
men.
top men like Walt.
Oh, he's on top of it.
Oh, God.
So when Walt did his magic science thingy, we saw that she had cut her long, luxurious, curly hair into a very aggressive, asymmetrical bob, and we got a tease that a new costume was coming. And what a costume it is! full splash page pinup of her being ogled by the construction workers as she lands and says, "Oh, Tom, please help with the French."
Hello, Sasquatch. Are you all finished with this sweaty business?
Oh, God. Sweat. Oh, Aurora. New costume looks like an Olympic gymnastics leotard, which makes sense. It's 1985. Gymnastics were everywhere the summer of 1984. It's got long sleeves, open shoulders, swimsuit style bottom, white pointy bits from her old costume up top, but like a symmetrical white piece on the bottom, which replaces the matched and mirrored bottom white feature her old costume shared with the hated North Star.
And instead of the black and white motif, this costume is yellow and white, very bright and eye-catching, as opposed to the sleek darkness of her old black and white duds.
And looking back, we haven't seen Aurora in her old costume since Marvel Team Up Annual number 7, which was published 6 months ago, and not in the Alpha Flight book proper since all the way back in issue number 12. So this is a big shakeup for the character, and helps show the book is changing the status quo moving forward. And so as a rough and tumble construction guys compliment her, one of them says, "How's about sharing some of that old joy de vivre?"
She replies, "Oh, messieurs, you think Aurora is that kind of girl? D'accord, you are right." And she grabs him, dips him down like his early Hollywood movie, and kisses him deeply.
So before the rest of the guys can form a line, Sasquatch reminds them that Aurora is only teasing them. She replies,
"Sasquatch, you have a way of taking all the fun out of life, and I see no reason to hang around with such a stick in the mud," and flies off.
So I'm wondering what Aurora would have done if Sasquatch hadn't been there. It sure sounds like she would have done stuff. She's that kind of girl, after all. She just told him that.
She does not appreciate being reined in by Sass here, and it shows in the art. Very pouty. She's also much more aggressively and openly sexual here than we've seen her, and that's saying something.
She once told a kid that she could suck the chrome off a trailer hitch, okay?
She also is completely dismissive of Walt once he does something she doesn't like. This is why we say that she is the most dramatic theater kid ever.
All of this, you know what? I've known people like this, Tom.
I've met some of the people that you've known like this. So
it's plural.
There we go.
Nobody knows. Meanwhile, in Heather Hudson's parents' living room, the rest of Alpha Flight is recuperating from their trip back in time where Elizabeth Two Youngman was thrust into using her poorly understood powers. I love how often Alpha Flight has team meetings in living rooms on couches with mismatched coffee mugs. Oh, love it.
Previously, Elizabeth discovered her powers when Shaman had her reach into his magic medicine bag and she brought out a metal headdress, crown, tiara.
Shaman calls it the Coronet of Enchantment here.
Well, la-dee-da.
Yeah, it gives you a +1 armor and advantage on skill checks.
I mean, it literally does do those things. Anyway, she pulled it out of his magic bag, and when she put it on, her costume appeared right down to her winged high heels.
All right, I'm going to rip this Band-Aid off. I am not a fan of this costume. It looks like a costume, like one for a stage play, not a superhero costume. It doesn't look superhero to me at all. I don't want to have to look at this, and I'm going to be looking at this for a long time.
Yeah, well, we already covered this.
Yeah.
Snowbird immediately bowed down to Elizabeth, calling her the talisman, freaking Elizabeth the fuck out. So, there's something inherently magically special about Elizabeth, and now she can't take the coronet of power off her head because it's bonded to her. This is her life now.
So while the magic folk talk amongst themselves, Heather and Puck slip off to the kitchen and talk about stuff. It mostly boils down to Heather saying she values Puck's friendship, experience, and advice in her new role as leader of the team, and Puck reciprocating all of that back along with a big old dose of puppy dogging, as it is clear Puck is interested in being there for Heather in every way he can. As he says, "Anything I have, anything I can do to help you, in any way." You can all but hear his eyebrows waggling up and down as he says it.
Look, I think that's a bit of an overstatement. He's not a puppy at this point, though from what you've told me, I do believe that's a common. He's certainly, this is not an overread. It's there. It's definitely there. I think you're making him a little bit too, slavish at this juncture.
I'm not trying to lay the slavish. I'm just saying I can clearly see that Puck is interested in spending time with Heather and that he is sniffing like a puppy dog there. So
yeah, it's the puppy dog bit that I just don't agree with, but whatever. Well, we can
So, Tom, in my ongoing efforts to get you to watch Venture Brothers, I have to give you this little aside that we'll probably cut. But there's a Colonel Gentleman who is Alan Quartermain, and he has the world's worst Sean Connery accent. And he's old as hell. And I remember him saying, "Ah, Ginsburg, that eager little puppy." See, that's the kind of deep nerd joke I know is going to get you to actually jump on board with this.
Yeah, there's a chance. And,
when the Scooby-Doo gang shows up in Venture Brothers, Shaggy is schizophrenic, and Scooby-Doo is telling him to commit murders for the master.
Oh, does this count as canon in the Scooby-Doo-niverse?
Listeners, I was telling Tom I did a craft fair over the weekend, and I spoke with a woman for more minutes than I thought possible about Scooby-Doo and the different shows and the character development that takes place over the different series, and it was revelatory. But anyway, apparently the word Scooby-Doo-niverse is used by people who say it out loud. Anyway, Scooby-Doo, good stuff. Check it out. But this is not a Scooby-Doo podcast, Tom. This is an Alpha Flight podcast. The fuck were we?
And back to that. Heather is decidedly oblivious to Puck's growing crush, which, I don't know, it's hard to read. Is that her just, like, not registering it? Is it her not being interested and so not acknowledging it? It's really hard to say.
It might be a standard female defense mechanism to appear oblivious to avoid letting a guy you have to work with down. Like, there's a bunch of different ways you can read this because it's left so blank. So we readers aren't the only ones who notice this, because as Heather leaves, Shaman enters the room and he sits down on the floor to have an eye-to-eye, man-to-man talk with Puck about puppy dogging after the recent widow.
And it doesn't go maybe as you would expect. Shaman says there will come a time, perhaps soon, when Heather will need someone again, someone strong and good, and someone kind. She will reach out. If she reached out to you, and I think it most likely that she will, you must not turn away. You must be prepared to give as much of yourself as she might need to take. I love Michael's emotional intelligence when it comes to anything other than his own fucking life. I feel a kinship there, I must say.
It all comes back to Scooby-Doo. I'm thinking about Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, and you got Stifler in the back of the Scooby-Doo van, and when they're trying to trick him. And when he says, "Oh, if I was a sheep, and she was a sexy sheep, well, you're goddamn right I'd mount up on that sheep, and I'd give that sheep the hell of a time." Like, I feel like Shaman's sitting down with Puck and being like, "Puck, listen to me. The day may come. It may never come, but it may come that Heather asks you to give it to her. When she does, you need to give it to her, Puck. You need to give it to her good. You got me, bro? I want you to rail my daughter's old babysitter. Just for all your little body is worth."
We read things so differently. But the problem is, it's a comic that's legitimate. There's no
I'm sorry,
he said.
You hadn't considered this reading before this moment, and now you're just
Absolutely
realizing
not. I
how
do not.
it is, and you're like, "Holy shit, that is what he's doing."
I'm the one that argued that Michael probably wasn't thrilled that Heather was married to a dude like 15 years older than she was.
And Puck says that he's twice her age, so he's like, "Hey, look, clearly she likes older dudes, Puck. All right, so you just gotta be ready for this because you."
Okay. We're done with this. We're done with this.
Puck fucks.
I didn't say he didn't. Man, okay. And this is legitimately in the script, folks. Man, this all happens in 2 pages, and they are a weird 2 pages. You think? We're both like freaking whatever. Okay.
Apparently, Puck fucks has become a bit of a catchphrase among our listeners, which I think is just fantastic.
Unbelievable. Well, that's it for pretty much the rest of Alpha Flight, with like one brief moment later.
Yeah, this is Tom's worst story arc ever.
Because now that all the talky soap opera stuff is out of the way, let's get to the action of these issues. It's a non-stop Walt and Aurora adventure here, as the two of them are checking out Tamarind Island, a property that Walt's family has, yeah, that's right, owned for a long time, thinking that it might make a suitable permanent base for Alpha Flight.
Yay! No more living room meetings. I mean, it's an old Western Canadian mansion, so I bet wherever they meet inside it will still be a living room. I mean, it's still somebody's house. It's just a big goddamn house.
Yeah, like the apartment on Laurier Drive would fit, like would be the living room in size. Yes.
It's probably the kitchen. Yeah.
Yeah. So Walt and Aurora take a cigarette boat straight out of Indiana Jones across the Straits of Juan de Fuca off the southern tip of Vancouver Island. He is wearing a purple turtleneck, blue sport coat with gold trimming and an honest-to-God white captain's hat. He looks like every rich middle-aged boat guy with a smoking hot post-divorce trophy girlfriend.
And going by his outfit on this adventure, Walt seems to be adding another title to his ever-expanding list, Commodore.
Where does Commodore fit in the ranking system?
Okay, the official definition is a naval officer above captain but below rear admiral, the president of a yacht club, or the senior captain of a shipping line. My favorite uncle was part of a yacht club in Florida, and as the president, he was awarded the title Commodore, and he wore it with pride. I once looked it up decades ago and remember it as being any person in charge of multiple boats, and that lines up with all of these meanings. And for those of you wondering, the difference between a boat and a ship is somewhat murky, but a good rule of thumb is
The rule of thumb here is wait, rule of thumb?
that a boat can be placed on a ship to be transported somewhere, but a ship is too big to be placed on a boat. So a vessel that's too big to be placed on another vessel is a ship, and anything that can be placed on another vessel is a boat.
Hence why the Enterprise was a ship, or will be a ship, or is a ship. Because it can't be placed inside or on another vessel.
False. Okay, this isn't researched or anything, but I do remember the Enterprise being inside another ship in the original series Rihansu novels. And Star Trek Online has battles that take place but with ships inside of Voth ships. So that relative definition is fairly useless.
When talking about space and relative dimensions, some analogies more than fail.
Listeners, my other nerd specialization is Star Trek. So if Alpha Flight and Star Trek got a crossover like the X-Men and Star Trek did twice, I would be so happy, and I would also probably hate it like I do the X-Men crossovers. But this is not a sailing ship or starship podcast, it's an Alpha Flight podcast. Aurora is wearing bikini bottoms and a useless sweater thing and complaining about the cold. They seem like an almost normal couple, Tom.
Normal in a lap of luxury sort of way, speeding across a lake to an old estate his family didn't have any use for but has been paying the taxes on for the last century, while she's barely dressed and he looks like he's cosplaying the millionaire from Gilligan. Walt, being a nepo baby, fills in so much.
It does. You know, I wouldn't be surprised, though, if he had a case of baby oil in the cigarette boat.
Moving past that. On the barely dressed part, as Chris noted, she comments that she's chilled, and he suggests it's because of the fiddling with her powers they did, which she's not super pleased with. I can't say I care over much for the sound of that. I want you to make my powers different from those of my brother. Must I now anticipate them being weaker?
To which Walt gives her a metaphorical pat on the ass and says, "Only time will tell."
What a dick.
Walt narrates some history about this house they're checking out, blah, blah, blah. His great aunt built it, blah, blah, blah. Married 9 times and widowed under mysterious circumstances each time, blah, blah, blah. You know, your basic Chekhov's history stuff. So, as they explore the surprisingly clean and well-appointed abandoned house, Walt falls through a hidden door and Aurora is caught in a supernatural darkness and has a mentee bee.
Again.
So is Aurora like a bird? If we put a cloth over her head and make it dark, does she revert to Jean-Marie?
And wasn't Walt's science magic supposed to let her use her light powers without having to touch North Star? Shouldn't that have been a big deal to her being able to light the hated dark? That would also give Aurora the ability to hold Jean-Marie in, even in darkness. And Walt is banging Aurora and would definitely want to help her stay in charge.
Because Walt is a simple man who likes his drama queen trophy, whatever she is to him.
Listeners, you may have noticed in the quotes we used earlier, but Aurora has been speaking with more of a French accent this issue, and Walt has noticed. Usually Aurora speaks English perfectly, and Jean-Marie has trouble with anything but French. Walt is hoping? This presages a fusion of the two personalities into a stable whole.
As Aurora talks her way through her panic in the dark, she doesn't go into Jean-Marie, but she does speak heavily accented at her lowest points. And this would have been a good subtle point if Byrne had been building this up over a few issues, and if she had actually said stuff in the last 12 issues, you know? And if Walt had not lampshaded exactly what's happening right here, on the last page, with he practically hung his stupid captain's hat on it, the previous page, and said, "Oh, look, she's speaking weird French." And again, this is written for kids, whatever.
Yeah. Aurora's bikini is written for kids.
Teenagers count as kids, Tom.
Not anymore.
Pre-internet days. Grasping in the dark, she finds a door and emerges into a room full of 8 life-size gold statues of men in a variety of historical costumes. Looking closer, Aurora sees one of them open his eyelid to reveal a completely human eye. So Great Aunt, 8 times widowed, gilded lily on the cover, 8 gold statues.
And that's who Aurora runs into as she leaves the statuary room. Lily looks like her cover photo is wearing a white robe with a huge swooping collar that, combined with her gold face mask, makes her look like a big lily. She introduces herself as Lillian van Loot, and that sounds kind of like a bad drag performer.
Or a good burlesque performer.
And in the cliffhanger end to the issue, Lily reviews her newest golden statue, our friend Walter LangKowski, in a terribly undignified pose, yes, that I call, "Where are my glasses?" Or perhaps, "Fondling the Giantess."
I love making you read things for the first time.
Yeah. By the way, when Chris yelled false at me earlier, that's complete bullshit because I'm just reading the fucking line he provided me. Moving on. This brings us to Alpha Flight number 21, titled Love Wrought New Alchemy. Cover date April 1985. Story and pencils by Jean Byrne.
Did you say Jean Byrne?
Maybe this is what he secretly wished. Inked by Bob Wiacek, colored by Andy Yankus, lettered by Rick Parker.
Yo, Tom, I'm going to let you finish, but yeah, more motherfucking Rick Parker letters, boy.
Edited by Denny O'Neil and Jim Shooter as editor-in-chief.
And by my count, this is the 50th comic book issue we have covered on this show. So, cheers to you, Tom.
Cheers to you, Chris. Take a drink.
This cover has the worst drawing of Sasquatch I have ever seen, and Aurora fighting against Silver Age Fantastic Four D-list villain Diablo. The cover says, "Bet on Diablo, he's been doing this for centuries." Diablo is wearing... You know what? It looks like Doctor Strange and Wolverine mashed up their costumes and then made it a purple, blue, and black color scheme. Diablo sucks. He always has. He always will. Though, having said that, I'm surprised he didn't end up as a recurring villain for Alpha Flight. They kind of fit each other at the right level. You know what I mean? And actually, Tom, dude wouldn't even have to be a villain. He could be on the team. He kills people. He makes alliances. He never succeeds, and he fucks.
The title is from a poem by John Donne. The second stanza goes, "Study me then, you who shall lovers be, at the next world, that is, at the next spring. For I am every dead thing, in whom love wrought new alchemy. For his art did express a quintessence even from nothingness, from dull privations and lean emptiness. He ruined me, and I re-begot of absence, darkness, death, things which are not." Alchemy, so John Donne was an English poet, lived in the late 16th, early 17th century, was a recusant Catholic, basically remained Roman Catholic and refused to practice Anglicanism, but did eventually convert, partially because he was forced to, member of Parliament. A lot of his poetry and writings just did not come out in his lifetime, so there's a lot of historical analysis around him. But the use of alchemy is interesting as we get into more of Lily's background and what she's doing. Beyond that, I just feel like if Masterclass existed at this time, I would argue that John Byrne was just doing
Say it again, he's Jean Byrne.
Jean Byrne. That's how I'm going to say his name from now on. Jean Byrne.
Oh, he'd hate that.
You'd hate that so much. I would argue that he was taking a masterclass on poetry in the Western canon from the last 500 years or something with what's showing up. It fits. I'm not saying it doesn't fit. I'm just curious as to...
They're deep cuts. Yeah.
Yeah. It's... Yes. And that's sort of the thing. Because there's a more famous John Donne poem called Love's Alchemy. That kind of also fits in well. It fits in well because it's similar themes about love and sex and the physical versus the spiritual, which were all major themes that Donne explored. But you would almost think Love's Alchemy would, I don't know, it suggests someone involved in this, whether it's Byrne or not. I'm not saying it's not Byrne, but someone involved in this has a pretty interesting either just education around this kind of poetry or a really fun collected anthology of poetry sitting on the bookcase that they pull down periodically and just alchemy go.
Okay, I realize it's probably that last point, but I like to believe in my headcanon that it's actually just Jim Shooter who knows all of this stuff. He doesn't have a reference. He's just like, oh yeah, blah, blah, and like spews out 3 verses of this and jots in the notation, and boom, that's what gets published. Jim Shooter, poetry aficionado.
Jim Shooter's nights are spent consulting with major dramaturgists around New York City on how best to reinterpret Othello. Yeah, I can see that.
The guy who ruined Marvel Comics for Secret Wars 2 for action figure sales is running around talking about poetry. That's silly, Tom. So after some framing with Lily and Aurora and the gold Walt statue, Golden Walt? Can I call him Golden Walt? Is that too subtle? The book opens up with 9 pages of backstory on Gilded Lily.
9?
9 pages, Tom. 9 pages of a character that makes 1 appearance after this issue. 9, and we're going to give you listeners none of them.
Well, how about 2 in a condensed form?
Fine. I still vote none. So Lily was born around 1855. Her husband died in a carriage crash. She stumbled to a nearby castle where she met Esteban Diablo, who uses his last name as his supervillain name. He is a master alchemist, already 1,000 years old at this time due to his discoveries. Lily becomes his student and his lover, eventually becoming nearly as skilled as Diablo in the alchemical arts. I love that word, alchemical. Eventually, his despotic rule of the countryside was ended by an uprising among his servants who sealed him in a wrecked lab for 100 years until Fantastic Four number 30 when John Byrne discovered him.
Lily discovers that surrounding living tissue and gold preserves its life, and goes about getting revenge on the men who betrayed Diablo and turned them into the 8 statues Aurora just saw. One neat thing going on here is that throughout these 9 pages of 9 pages of her background, we never see Lily's face, though she is described as a rare beauty. The golden mask she wears is meant to convey beauty, but it is also inscrutable. So just it's smart. I mean, it's very clever. Frankly, it's one of the things I've really appreciated about digging into all these with you, Chris, is the amount of clear thought going on here in something that's supposedly for kids, but they have a really strong mastery of
storytelling,
of words, of storytelling, but of the interaction of words and image.
I think that this would be a really neat visual in a TV show. This story couldn't sustain a movie. It'd be a great Halloween episode, though. Just having this inscrutable face, because when we think of Gilded Lily, we think of this mask, and yet for her physical life while she was alive, her defining feature was what her physical face looked like, and it's subtle. Good job, John. Good job. We're talking about this one-off character how many years later?
Lily then takes Aurora to her alchemical laboratory. Do I have?
Yes,
okay.
It has
Chris
to be pronounced laboratory. It's alchemy, Tom. It's a laboratory. Lily
then takes Aurora to her alchemical laboratory to properly pose her as Lily's first female statue.
Creepy.
Want to note, there's no real reason given here other than they stumbled into this space. It's not because everyone else she's taken down and done this to, there was a revenge motivation.
Oh, you're right.
That's not happening with either Walt or Aurora. It's just that they're there, and because they're there, they have to be punished the same way.
She keeps calling Walt handsome, and I don't think she realizes that Walt is her descended kin. And much like Snowbird, she doesn't have the means anyway.
Anywho, Walt comes to realizes
I've never
he's
seen
been
your eyes that wide, Tom.
Walt comes to, realizes he's been coated with something, and triggers his gamma-irradiated thyroid or whatever. I mean, I don't really give a shit. You know what? Walt's not a scientist either. He did alchemy. And Sasquatch bursts from the golden shell, finds the lab, and wrecks it. Nice little parallelism there.
Thank you.
As Lily turns to glide away, Sasquatch grabs her white robe, pulling it off of her to reveal... Oh boy.
So with the mask and the robe and her otherworldly inscrutability, Lily has seemed to glide through the space that she occupies, and the reason that she does that is because she's full Lieutenant Dan. She got no legs, Tom. She's got wheels and a spindly metal steampunk body and weird goo in her chest where her lungs should be. And then there's her metal like head, because it's not just her mask, even the hair underneath it, it's all gold because she has to encase her living flesh in gold in order to have her long life. It's a surprise. It's a very good one. It gives the character more story about how she lost her physical body without saying anything. It's very body horror out of nowhere.
Walt yanks her mask off to reveal her only remaining humanity, her face, a mess of age and scars and not the graceful beauty she made herself up to be. And as soon as the mask is removed, what is left of Lily's human body crumbles to dust as a century of age hits it all at once.
And as goes Lily's body, so goes her house. The laboratory collapses around Sasquatch and Aurora, who are buried in the dust of a century as the lab disintegrates around them. They get out of this mountain of dust when Sasquatch sneezes with the force of a naval gun. Like, imagine the loudest dad sneeze you've ever heard and make it gamma-powered. It's on page. It's canon, Tom.
The formerly well-appointed and cared-for home has now been stripped down to bare wood with no evidence of Lily or her possessions. Does this count? They came there to get a new headquarters.
Oh, no.
And they failed.
No.
Does this count
No. They showed up, they found a haunted house, they exorcised the ghost, and now they have an empty house that they can use as a base for Alpha Flight. No, Tom, we have a success!
What do we do when there's a success? We don't have a plan for this.
I don't know.
Donate some shoes. Okay, moving on.
I mean, it's good advice, don't get me wrong. Well, I guess Lily died, so there's a drink.
I mean, she did team up with Diablo at one point.
Yeah, but that wasn't on, like in this issue. It was just in those 9 pages. Sex. I mean, Lily didn't need to take Aurora off somewhere else and get her posed up, and I do wonder about what those poses were going to be. So we'll squeak that one is an oopsie doopsie and call that a drink. But no failure, Tom. So a couple of things before we close out the issue. Walt conjectures again at the end of this issue that Aurora's behavior suggests perhaps a third personality emerging, like a blend of the 2 classic flavors. We shall now call this new personality Arnold Palmer in recognition of his service to soft drink history, and not in memory of his big swinging putter.
And there's a single-page interlude of Snowbird flying, doubling over in pain, and crashing into the snow. She says, "I am a child of the gods, and only they could strike at my very being like this. But why?" The gods might not be happy that Snowbird and Doug are getting in touch with her humanity.
Can you imagine coming home to your godparent and saying, "Hello, godparent. This is who I spend my time with. Doug." No offense to any Dougs out there. It's just like, look, introducing him to your father when your father's a dentist is one thing. When your mother is goddess of all the northern lights, you expect, like, I don't know. I mean, okay, Topher would be worse. I'll give him that.
You know what? You want to be even worse as a name? Walt. I cannot stand that dude.
Well, Tom, he is going to be the most consistent member of Alpha Flight through every possible incarnation. In fact, in volume 3, he's the leader of the team. Like, he's the one going out and recruiting them because he's like, look, somebody's got to do this. And apparently I'm the best person for the job, and that should terrify all of you.
Yeah, it scares the shit out of me, that's for sure.
Well, listeners, that brings us to listener mail. Yay! This is so exciting. I always love when we have listener mail.
Today's mail is from Matt in California. Matt, great to hear from you again. He says, "Hello again. You guys continue to be the podcast I look forward to most on a weekly basis. It's like revisiting the days of talking with friends on the way back from the comic book store, except maybe a bit more snarky. Dude, I really hope it is. We're 40-year-old men. If you guys as teenagers are sounding more snarky than us and more broken, then shit, Matt." Moving on, his alpha notes. 1. In regards to his previous email, re-Calamy, where Chris said it wasn't as bad as the Hundal writing, he'd have preferred bad writing to bad art. At least good art with bad writing is still pretty to look at.
Okay, that's a reasonable point.
Number 2. Who do you think would have been the first Alphan to join the Avengers? If you said a Marina unofficially, you would be a liar. I would have voted for Sasquatch. Connections to the Hulk plus his 2-in-1 and Champions appearances make it look like Marvel, at least, had an inkling he could do his own thing apart from the flight.
You know what? I'm going to interject here, and I'm going to give my thoughts on this. I think it should have been North Star and Aurora, because that's a skill set that without Quicksilver around, because he's not around at this time, I don't believe, would be very helpful, and flyers are always helpful. But when Byrne broke them up because they made him do this Alpha Flight book, that kind of reduced them to not being main characters. Because if you remember, they had the most exposure, except for Walt and Guardian, in the earliest phases. So I think that would have been what happened if it hadn't been Sasquatch. Because clearly, you know what would have happened? Instead of him joining the Avengers, when the heavy hitter of the Fantastic Four needed to take a break, John Byrne would have absolutely plunked Sasquatch into the Fantastic Four. That's what would have happened before anybody joined the Avengers. That's what I think, Matt.
Well, and honestly, then it's just a race. If Sasquatch gets plugged into the Thing role on Fan 4, then he never goes to the Avengers. If he goes to the Avengers first, he never gets plugged into the Thing role in Fan 4.
And there's nobody else he could plug into the Fantastic Four, so I would bet that John would keep Sasquatch in his pocket just in case he had to keep doing this book.
Number 3, speaking of Marina, I never thought of her as having a Newfie accent. I've got relatives from Newfoundland, so I can hear it clearly in my head, but never put together that she would adopt the accent being an alien and all. Odd indeed. Yes, B.
Yeah, I think it's a yes, bye. It's one of those things that, man, you can do it or you can't, and if you can't do it, everybody knows you can. I cannot. There's a character in Shoresy that does it, and that's the only reason, I have an idea about what it should sound like.
So that's all for this time. Keep up the good work. Matt in California. P.S. What's the official take a drink beer of the pod? Labatt's, Moosehead, Molson. I love that you bring this up, Matt, because this email came in before our episode with Rick and Jeff. And if you've listened to the episode, I'm sure you have, you know that those fine gentlemen were enjoying Labatt's Blue throughout the course of our recording.
I wouldn't say they were enjoying it, Tom. And for my part, I can attest that it is Canadian Superior whiskey, which is not on the bottom shelf, but on the floor in front of the bottom shelf.
And mine would typically be a Daisy Cutter from Half Acre here in Chicago. One of the most deliberately unfortunately named beers of all time.
For beer, I would generally be going for a Zwickel Lager from Urban Chestnut Brewing Company, which is, I think, around here. But no Canadian connection other than rock bottom whiskey, because they're good at that.
Very good at that. Oh, and hey, here's that big announcement. Listeners, as we enter Thanksgiving week, we want to take a moment and say how thankful we are for you. And if you're thankful for us, please consider supporting our just launched Patreon. Not only do you get the satisfaction of kicking us a couple bucks for all the hours of entertainment you've had this year, but we now have official extra content for you to enjoy there as well. Check it out on Thursday when you can hear the Why Not Have a Drink Thanksgiving special, Highlander. Hope you'll check us out there and help us keep bringing you the voodoo that we do so well.
Why Not Read Alpha Flight is brought to you by the Excelsior Embroidery Company. Come check out the 150 items for sale, including comic book-themed patches, towels, and wall hangers. And now, hats. Get a jump on Christmas shopping with a variety of classic and cheeky designs. See it all at excelsiorembroidery.etsy.com.
Why Not Read Alpha Flight is released every other week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and now on YouTube and your preferred podcatcher. You can find links to all of our socials and maybe leave us a comment on our blog at www.thewhynotpod.com, where you can listen to us while staring at our logo. Why Not is recorded in Chicago, Illinois, and deep beneath stately Baker Manor in a fashionable neighborhood outside St. Louis. It is produced and edited by Tom Flynn, that's me, with background cat noises provided by Teeny, who's shown up at the very end here. Hi, Teeny.
She's well fed. Join us next time as we jump into an adventure guest starring North Star that is teased as having the title Rub Out. So join us next time for Rub Out with North Star, which is totally not going to be what you think it is right now. Dear God, I hope so.
See you then.